Hey everyone, it's Sen here, and we're live with Meeple Syrup on a Friday night. I know, we should really be out partying because, that's what Eric and I always do. We go out and
All the
party
time.
on Friday nights, right? But we have some special guests here with us tonight. We have Will and Sarah Reed. Will and Sarah, where are you guys at? You're in California somewhere, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sacramento.
Oh, Sacramento, California. Lovely place, lovely place. And Erica, what's up with you tonight?
I'm home doing this. This is exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah. And
Where else would I be?
I don't know. I don't know. You could be anywhere. You're a woman of mystery. I don't know.
Sure.
Sure. Um, I've noticed that we don't have our chat. So, eh? If the
Yeah,
chat comes
sorry
up,
guys,
we
we're
will
not sure
try
what's
to.
going on.
Yeah, we'll try to catch you guys on the chat. If it pops up, that'd be great. If not, well, we'll figure out how to chat with you guys in a bit. But tonight we're gonna have an episode about really looking at how to design games for people who have disabilities that we can't see. So a lot of times, with disability, it's pretty easy to see some of them, like, cerebral palsy. We kind of understand what that is. If somebody has a spinal cord injury, we know what that looks like. But when people have invisible disabilities, whether they're invisible physical disabilities or invisible mental health issues, we don't know, right? And the world is increasingly neurodiverse. Neurodiversity meaning that everybody's brain is kind of based on the same template, but it doesn't end up being the same by the end of your adolescent years and into your brain age at 27 is when you really kind of stop developing. But even after that, if incidents happen like injury or disease, then we're going to get people who have, a great range of neurodiversity. And as the game scene becomes more and more inclusive, and we should probably talk about that in a second as well, um, we're going to have more people playing games that don't function typically. And that's okay. And we're going to talk today about how to deal with that as designers, as players, and how to deal with that if we ourselves are not, might have a disability that can't be seen. And how does that work into the whole design process for us? Erica, I wanted to ask you before we started, tell me about Roar, because I've just seen pictures that you and Daryl have posted. And in fact, Vincent Dutre has posted pictures as well, which is pretty awesome. So tell me a little bit about Roar before we get started.
Yeah, sure. So it's a game that Daryl and I co-designed that's coming out from IDW in I think it's February of next year. And it's an area control game where you're actually lions in Africa and you're using different mechanics throughout it that is like actions that lions would actually use. And there's this kind of fun human element that encroaches and forces you in different directions as you go through. So it's kind of a hopefully people find a fun take on area control.
Excellent, excellent. The chat's back up, by the way. So if you hit
Yay.
refresh, you can get to the chat, which is awesome. So it's an area control game, and I noticed that it's a map of Africa, obviously, where
Mhm.
lions are. Um, and what else is there about the game? I know because you're a teacher, is there a lot of actual like real biology and ecology built into there?
Funny enough, yes.
Well, I figured there
Actually,
would be.
yeah, I mean, we couldn't help it. We had to do some research into it. So, one of the things we also had to do was unfortunately set there's two games that go side by side. The maps actually butt up to each
Hmm.
other. But we had to set everything kind of back in the 1900s because the animals we're using don't all exist anymore, unfortunately.
Aw.
Oh, that's
So you
sad.
get to learn about extinct lions and tigers. I'm sorry to take everybody down, but you get to learn about them.
Oh,
So,
right. I was just about to say a tiger in Africa. That's not
well, no, the
much of a thing
tigers are in
anymore.
Asia.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. Um,
The second game is a map of Asia, which sort of had to fudge the world a little bit to get the maps to line up. But you don't notice that much, I
that's
promise.
okay. Risk has been doing
But
it for
it's sort of
decades.
yeah.
It's okay. It's all right. It's all right.
It looks vaguely right.
Okay. Cool. So you guys will be coming out with that in around February. So IDW has a very strong February lineup apparently. Lion, Roar, and I don't know this thing called Cora that'll be out in February too. So
Oh, just that little thing. Did you
Just
want
that
to tell
little
us a
thing.
little bit about Coruscant?
No, I've spent the last month living it, so I'm fine without telling about it. Jesse's probably he's
Yeah,
on the
you could
Jesse's on
summarize
the
the
chat
highs
right
of
now.
it. What's the highs?
What's the highs of
Just
it?
like tell about it.
It's a
Yeah.
two-player game that features some of the greatest characters in modern animation, and it's really strategic, fun, tactical, all that stuff rolled into one in a game that you can play in about 20 to 30 minutes per match if you really want to go for best 2 out of 3, or all that kind of stuff. The detailed miniatures are wonderful, and I'm going to actually paint something. I don't paint very well, so I will try my head at painting those though. But yeah, enough about me and you. Let's get to our guests. We're going to introduce you guys to Sarah and Will Reed. Sarah and Will, can you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Oh, okay. Well, we're board game designers as hobbyists. We put out Project Dreamscape back in 2015, was it?
Well, the Kickstarter was in 2014, and then
the game released.
In 2015.
And then just this last year, we made Oaxaca, and that's going to be released next year, probably around March, I think is what we're thinking. Otherwise, we're big into Lego.
Right.
Yeah, I've been building
Sarah's pictures.
Yeah, I've been building the big Millennium Falcon that just came out, $800 set.
Yes.
Wow.
And I have to review that thing, but it's taken forever to build.
Yeah, we started that at the beginning of September, and we're still working, but we're making better progress this month. We just finished phase 10 out of 17. So it's the biggest set they've released so far, the most expensive set. The previous one was the Death Star at $500. I don't know the piece count on that one.
Hey,
it's pretty high, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a 5,000.
Yeah.
And this one's about 7,500.
Yeah, 7,500 pieces. Yeah. So between our two hobbies of Lego and board games, we stay very active. We help run our local Lego club. I run a local game design group. In fact, tomorrow's our monthly meeting. So we're taking our next game, Haven's Vault, to play test tomorrow, and that's progressing well. Depending on how it develops, maybe we'll do a Kickstarter next year. If not, we'll do it the year after.
Okay, great. So let's get the ball rolling in terms of the topic of the day, which is the title of this one is Sight Unseen, specifically dealing with low vision, visual impairment, and then other invisible disabilities. Now, I know that you were telling me, Sarah and Will, that both of you have issues that you are living with and that impact your abilities to play games, to design games, and yet you're still doing it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I would say Will's is probably more evident because he's legally blind. You want to...
Yeah, in other words, anything that requires some sort of legal license to do something, say, like driving, I really shouldn't do.
You can't do legally.
Yeah, I can't do.
Yeah, we always joke.
Might want to, but he really
yeah,
should.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I have.
Yeah,
I have
off-road stuff.
Okay.
So he has a couple different conditions which take away different parts of his vision. So when as gamers, when we play games, it restricts the type of games that we can play. So anything that requires a detailed map or a high level of hidden information, those are games that we pretty much have to avoid.
I mean, I'll still try them.
Yeah.
Because I've really worked up my neural muscles, and in fact, when it comes to that whole neuro thing, it's like a beefcake up on top of my shoulders.
Yeah. He's got a well-developed memory, but he's had these vision issues since, what was it, 8? You were 8 years old?
It was part of me being born. I think 8 is when they first diagnosed him.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
So he's had these vision issues for most of his life. So, I mean, I'm just amazed he can remember phone numbers. I can't remember phone numbers at all to save my life.
People used to do that.
Right? We used to have to do that all the time.
So actually, interestingly, Haven's Vault, which he designed, he actually can't play because it's too visual. But
that's interesting. That's really interesting.
He designed it all in his head because that's what he does is he designs everything up here. Then he tells me and we work through some stuff. He thinks about it some more. And then I get notes from him and then we, work through the process. But with Haven's Vault, once we had a physical game and he sat down to try to play it, he couldn't because of the puzzle aspect was too detailed for him. So.
Okay.
And then for me, I have a lot of more physical health issues. I also was born with some physical issues like scoliosis. So I have a lot of back problems. And I had surgery when I was 12. So I have a metal bar in my back. And I pretty much have had chronic pain my whole life. And that's just not easy to deal with, being in pain all the time, zaps your energy. I can say very honestly, I have been in a deep depression at least twice in my life because that much pain just sucks you down. But because of the hobbies and what we do together, I'm able to stay afloat. I mean, there's still times where the chronic pain is like, nope, you're not sitting down to do anything right now because that hurts. But it's working through those issues. And like I said, the hobbies help us keep going.
And I hope you know that whenever you post about how many steps you've taken and how many laps you've done around, I cheer you on from Canada.
Well, thank you so much.
I literally am. I'm reading your thing going, that's awesome. Keep walking. That's great.
Well, I'm very excited. I added stairs and it exhausts me. But after I get past the exhaustion, I do feel better. So this is literally a step in the right direction.
Yeah, quite. It's funny. So I was talking to my wife today about, so we're both therapists, and my wife was talking about how the psychologist at her office, one of them, is talking about, is the work you're doing actually effective because the children you're treating still have symptoms. And my wife is saying, yes, but they're actually getting out of bed and going to school. What do you want?
Yeah.
Do you want function or do you want lack of symptoms? Because sometimes lack of symptoms isn't actually possible. But
nope.
Would you like some improvement in function? Because that's something I can help you do, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, hey, look, we have a wild Richard appeared.
Yeah.
Hi, Richard, how are you?
For some reason, decided that we were starting a half hour later than you scheduled.
Oh, sorry.
Made up a time, and I thought that as I looked at it, and you're like, we're starting without you, and I looked at the time, and anyway.
That's okay. Where are you located right now, Richard?
I'm in Pearland, Texas, which is just south of Houston. So.
Okay, so you're in the Central Time Zone-ish? I can never remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have people in Pacific and Central, and we're in Eastern. So that's why this is hard to get all coordinated. I'm gonna pass the mic over to Erica right now. Erica, you can talk to Richard, because he has stuff to tell us.
I do?
That's why I invited you here, bud.
Okay.
Oh, 1 second, Erica. I think you're muted.
No, I think she's just mocking you now.
No, now I think you're not. Your mic's not on, or you're not. Oh, there now. It's muted. Now try to unmute it.
Mute icon.
No, we can't hear you at all.
We are having nothing but technical difficulties.
Well, this is Erica's story. So oddly enough, Erica, you now have a lower third, but you do not have a microphone. So maybe it's not Daryl's fault. Maybe all that bad talking you were doing to Daryl before the show started is like coming back to haunt you. Maybe that's what happened. Okay, so she's going to go fix something. So I will ask Richard questions. All right, Richard, tell us about 64 ounce.
Okay, so I'm an aspiring game designer. I wanted to get my games published, and then there was this thing that I kept reading about, Kickstarter. So I decided that I could do a Kickstarter to get my own games published. I was like, all right, there's all these people kickstarting games now. What can I do to make myself different? And I was like, well, I know a lot of blind people. My wife is a teacher of blind students. That's what she does for her career. I've studied Braille myself. So I could, if I made my games blind accessible, there'd be some niche, some reason for people to back my project over all the other ones that are popping up all over the place. So I was like, okay, this is a strategy. I'll use it. So I started contact. I got my game. What I thought was ready. It's probably wasn't, but that's okay. I got my game ready to go, and then I started contacting manufacturers saying, "All right, how I'd like to make this blind accessible." And the game manufacturers like, "We don't know how to do it." So I started contacting people who specialize in Braille. They're like, "We don't do games," and so I was like, all right, so how can I do this if the guys who are experts on both sides don't know how to do it? So then I decided that what I would do is, instead of doing my game first, I'd start off making what I called accessibility kits, which took pre-existing board games, especially card games at the very beginning. We're doing a little bit more board games now. We took pre-existing card games and added Braille to them.
Mm-hmm.
The way we did this is we have sleeves that can go on them, just over the shelf sleeves that you can get from Mayday Games or Fantasy Flight or whatever. Mayday is the one who supplies us. They give us a slight discount, and we have sticky Braille that it comes that I braille and I emboss and I put on sheets, and it's transparent. So we put those on the sleeves, and you put your regular card game into the sleeves that now have transparent Braille on them, and you can play your game just like it's intended. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. That ended up taking over my entire concept of my company. My company, 64 Ounce Games, was supposed to be publishing my games. So I'm still seeking publishers if someone's out there.
All right,
so
am I back?
You are back. You're
Oh,
back in
okay,
business.
I'm back.
All right.
Okay.
Just before we get Erica to ask a question to Will and everybody out in sunny California, Richard, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. Are you using like a Braille printer, or you're not hand brailing, are you?
No.
Oh, okay, there it is. I see it.
Okay. Let me show you the office. Right here, we have an embosser, which basically is what you call a Braille printer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got sticky Braille coming out of it. Next to it, we have our my 3D printer, which right now has a Braille D20 on it.
Right. Very neat.
So we make those too. And then behind that, we have our Balloonicle, which this part of it seems to be dying.
Yeah, that's too bad.
It's slowly getting sad.
And just another quick question. Sorry, as Erica gets ready to ask questions the other way, to Sarah and Will. Richard, are you using like grade 1 or grade 2 Braille, or what style? What
right
level
now we use UEB mostly. I mean, that's
okay.
what it's supposed to all go to. For those of you who don't know, Braille is made up of contractions. So there's, instead of like Richard, which is my name, instead of being R-I-C-H-A-R-D, it's R-I-C-H
H is one thing, yeah.
A-R sign D. So if my name was in Braille, it'd be a lot shorter to type. And each one of those is made up of a Braille cell. So that's called contractions. And there are single word contractions for some words, like Lord, because you definitely don't want to type out the entire word Lord. And some other ones, and there's a whole list of them. Once you get to know them, they aren't that bad, but it requires memorization. So I don't remember what the point of this was. The point is, he was asking, do I use grade 1 Braille, which is basically 1-to-1, one letter to one little symbol. Each symbol is made up of 6 things.
Yeah.
And we use contracted UEB Braille for most of our stuff.
Okay, interesting. I just asked that because I know in Canada, Braille is kind of a dying language, unfortunately, just due to the number of people who are relying more heavily on technology than they are actual printed materials now. So it's a sad sort of reduction in that language.
That is a tragedy, an absolute tragedy that more people aren't getting Braille education.
Yeah.
And studies that correlate Braille education to employment and just, I mean, there's no substitute for being able, like when we read, if you have an audio file, you can't go back and read things over, and you can't study a textbook. And it isn't, it's upsetting to me.
Yeah, it's upsetting to me as well. And so I kind of have to. I'm wondering what's actually happening in the system. I've been away from the Canadian National Institute for the Blind for 12 or 13 years now. So I've been kind of out of that field, but I do wonder what is happening. So I should actually go find out. That's what I might do. I might go find out. Erica, are you ready?
Yeah. What I thought maybe we could do is I was going to push the conversation over to Sarah and Will.
Of course.
Because you guys were kind of talking about how you've had to learn and adjust and train yourself to be able to play games. So maybe we start a little bit broad with things that people know, but what kind of, in terms of, let's say, popular or well-known games, which ones do you find actually are really accessible? Because maybe we can talk a little bit what those companies are doing right so other people can kind of follow that example.
I don't really think about it that way because I started out with some really hard stuff. I mean, I learned Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, I taught him that.
And in doing so, I would have to memorize entire blocks of Magic the Gathering cards as they came out. And I'd always end up with a headache the next couple of days. That was one of the ways I could, easily play with others because they just say the name and I already know all the
you memorize
the
their abilities.
Stats. Yeah, the abilities, what they do, what their strengths are, what their life is. So,
Will's not your typical blind person, I would say. I probably pushed him like that. Like I said, when he and I started dating, I introduced him to Magic the Gathering and role-playing games. And yeah, it was a new experience. I mean, he'd played board games as a kid, but nothing like Magic the Gathering. But he just pushed on through, and we played Magic for years. And every single time a new block came out, he'd stuff it in his head somehow and remember it all.
Yeah.
That's commitment. That's commitment.
But when it comes to games, it's anything with open information or simple information has always been really easy. No thanks, for example, is a good thing because you just need to know whatever the top number is and say no thanks and put a chip on it or take it and figure out what it is for you. And my parents are both visually impaired, so what I ended up doing is taking my copy and brailing out the numbers so that they could read it. They didn't even require like someone like Sarah to say, oh, that's number 37 to make that accessible.
So that's kind of how we've made games accessible, is looking for games that have open information. Or, for example, most deck builders, when it gets to his turn, most deck builders, there's nothing I can do on his turn. So I'll just read his cards to him, and then he'll make the decisions on what to play.
Even though that is different than how the game is originally intended.
Right.
It's modifying it to make sure that you can play.
Yeah.
Co-ops are great. Most co-ops that don't require, like, we did actually try Hanabi.
I was just going to ask.
It was not easy. What did we end up doing?
Sale.
It was on sale. So as designers, we wanted to try it to see what it was, because it won awards. And then we gave the copy to somebody else. But I put my cards face down. And so there was
I still had to go over to my closed circuit.
That's right.
And I had to make sure that the Japanese characters that represented the different colors were distinct enough that I could tell. Unfortunately, they were. So I still had to use vision for that one.
Yeah,
but that would be an easy one to add.
Right. So that's where the importance is not just relying on color, but having symbols.
Right. And for those of you who are watching and can see behind Sarah and Will, behind Sarah's head is the CCTV, which is basically a closed circuit television that can have it has a magnifier on the bottom of it that transmits up to the screen that you see right beside Sarah's head, and so that magnifies whatever Will puts under there so he can see it.
Right.
So it helps with people who have residual vision to actually get information off of the cards, and then the braille also will obviously just add even more. Sarah, does he ever cheat by reading the braille?
He cheats because he's smarter than me and can remember everything.
I don't know if that's really cheating, Sarah. I'm not really sure.
Darn, because sometimes
counting cards isn't cheating, right?
That's true.
There's certain games I've told her, well, you have this, and this in your hand.
Yeah. Sorry, Richard, were you saying something?
I was just saying, I claim to my wife that remembering the past is cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah, see?
How did you remember 2 turns ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forget everything.
Forget
But
everything.
yeah, that's just it. In certain games, Will remembers what I have and I don't. So he's just expanded his brain so much. So it's like I'm not competitive when we play with a lot of other people, but when he and I play alone, I feel real competitive because it's a lot to beat him at any of the games, unless there's a couple where I do shine, but he definitely gives me a run for my money.
Excellent. So bringing it back to design, what kind of designs do you guys specifically work on in terms of, or how do you make a design more friendly for people who are visually impaired? Is it strictly the graphic design and the layout of the cards, or is there more to it than that in terms of, number of bits of information and all that kind of stuff? What do you think?
So far in the 2 games we've published, everything's public information, right?
For the most part.
Well, Haka's all public information.
Well, when you draw the 2 cards.
But somebody can read you those cards.
Yeah, and it's not so big of a problem.
And then Project Dreamscape, everything is face up.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, is making everything public information.
Or to the point where it doesn't matter.
Or where it doesn't matter. And yes, icons. Most of my early prototypes, I go to Game Icons and just download a whole bunch of icons that'll work so that it's that makes it more accessible.
It's never reliant on just color.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but at the same token, I'm not going to restrict it just because it's a game I can't play. I like the mental challenge of designing games. So Haven's Vault is a game that I can't play, but I still love designing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah, so far that's been really an interesting design process for us, because most of our play testing is the 2 of us, but with Haven's Vault, he can't play test it at all. So I've had to be doing a lot of solo play testing, although we did sit down the other night and it was really hard, but we walked through a solo game together because I was trying to show him where it wasn't working. But since he didn't have a concept of how the experience was, it was hard for me to explain that to him. So this has been a different process with him not being able to actually play it, because experience is very important to us in the games that we design.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Richard, when you're looking at a game to modify for people to use with Braille, what specifically are you looking for?
I'm not looking for games to Braille. People are asking me for games to Braille.
Okay, when people ask you for games to Braille, what are they asking for, and why do you think that those are the specific ones they ask for?
Well, what they're asking for, the games that they see a lot, like Cards Against Humanity, Red Dragon Inn, and usually it doesn't really. What they ask for doesn't really correlate to what is easy or what is possible to do necessarily.
Interesting.
It's games that are out and doable. Some thoughts on what they were saying about game design. Some people always ask me about what my thoughts on game design towards blind players are. And I really don't think that you should design towards a blind audience. And I'm seeing Will nodding there.
Yeah.
I think that you should use mechanics and if it's adaptable, we can adapt it. And so I guess what I'm saying is designers don't let that restrict you. I think that as far as approaching blind community, one of the interesting things that I don't think is utilized enough is blind as a mechanic. It's getting a little bit more popular now than it has been, but the fact that taking advantage of hidden information and someone not being able to see. I know that Haba has a game like 13 Islands. There's one called Master Fox, which uses tactile things. But so that would be my approach. The game Set we looked at, and we ended up doing that as an adaptation of that as a Kickstarter. Our first Kickstarter, we called it Yoink. But it was a completely tactile version of Set, so it wasn't the same game because we had to take out one of the symbols because it became too unplayable without it. But it was a completely tactile thing, and I think that that's something in game design that isn't utilized as much as it could be. So as far as game designers thinking about blind people, think about how you can use the fact that someone can't see or doesn't know something for something interesting to happen in the game.
That's very cool.
That's a nice approach, yeah. I'm going to ask you a really quick question, Richard, and then I'm going to throw a question from the chat at you. So just a quick question, because I'm sure people out there have gamers in need of your services or games. Where can they get them? Where can they pick up your games that have been turned into Braille?
Well, all of our games we sell online at 64ouncegames.com.
Okay.
But we don't sell most games. We just sell the accessibility kits, and then you go and purchase the games themselves, and they have to assemble it themselves. Now, there are some
That's
companies
good to have choice, yeah.
relationship with, like Indie Boards and Cards. We sell a combo kit that has Coup and the Braille with it. We have a partnership with Haba, which I love their games, and we sell combo kits with a couple different companies. But being that this is happening in my house, I don't really want to stock every single game that I sell. We have like over 100 different titles in our store, and we have the Braille dice, and we have everything. So if we stocked everything that we have tried to sell, we'd be in trouble. Of course, I have games there that I've brailled that no one has ever bought. But that's one thing about my business is all print on demand. Once I get an order through my website, I will emboss it, and I try to have a 2 to 3 week turnaround to get it in the mail. There is no stock.
Right.
No, it's good to know. It's good to know the process. So Jesse in the chat wants to know what the most challenging game you've ever had to Braille is.
Probably the one that's in our store that's the most challenging would be Pandemic.
So why was this so hard?
Because you have a board and a lot of information, and the nice thing about Pandemic is it's a lot of open information. So if you are playing with blind and sighted players, they can communicate and give more information. But just having a tactile, really spread out board is very hard. And plus, when I was doing that, I didn't have the technology that I do now. I have a thermoform machine in our garage, which lets us do transparent
Like a board overlay.
Yeah, like an overlay. So when I was doing Pandemic, I was using sticky Braille, which isn't nearly as tactile. I mean, it's like it doesn't go up nearly as much, so it's harder to do. Plus, I don't have the resolution to do a really good job with it. So I think Pandemic is probably our most intensive kit. It isn't the hardest to put together by far. The hardest to put together is Cards Against Humanity. There are too many cards there.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes sense. You'll just be sticking cards all day long. With
that and the fact that there's so much text on the cards. It's our best-selling kit, and I will tell you right now, it is our worst kit. by far.
Oh.
The reason why it's our worst kit is it's got so many cards, and it also the cards are. I use sleeves that are bigger than the actual cards because I need to fit all the braille on it. Because what's the fun if you have to have someone read it to you, and so this you have to put it. So you have a sleeve, and you have to put in like cardstock behind it, and then slip the card in so that everyone can play together. And then when you put the braille on top of that, so it makes the card a little bit bigger than the traditional card, just so that all the braille can fit on there, because some of them are ridiculously long-winded.
Right.
With other games that have long words, we'll use reference sheets or QR codes or something to make up for that, but it would be too slow and too arduous to try to do something like that with Cards Against Humanity, which you can do anyway.
So sorry, I'm looking for something. Yeah. So Will and Sarah, I wanted to ask you about that. Richard brought up QR codes, and Sir Bob in the chat has asked about, what about using QR codes and a reader app plus a headset to get information off cards or something like that? Would that be feasible? Would that be helpful for you, Will? What do you think?
It would be, but it's labor intensive because you're putting a QR code and making sure that that information is on every single card, and it's definitely more possible now, I think, for like a board game manufacturer, if you supply the right information, that it could be made easier. The problem you start then running into is, say, older people that might be technologically challenged.
Right.
Getting used to apps and things like that.
Plus, I will have to point out, wearing a headset while you're playing a game also then takes you out of the game and distances you from the people that you're playing with.
Yeah, so for a blind person, putting headset on is actually taking one of their really used sensory organs that
you
they
rely
really rely on.
Yeah, you rely on your ears when you don't have your eyes. So it is a solution, and I think younger generations are probably more savvy. Like for us in our design, I don't know how to do QR codes. I mean, not that I couldn't learn, but I don't know how to design or program QR codes, how to put them into our games or anything like that. And then here's the other thing. If you have a QR code, you have to make sure there's room for that and everything else you want on said component. So you have to make sure the QR code isn't going to take up the space that you do need for the sighted people. So again, that's why, as Richard brought up, it's hard to design for vision disabilities, but it's good to design with them in mind, because there are easy things you can do to make it more accessible. But it doesn't mean you should stop making a game if it's not. I mean, like, we're still making Haven's Vault and Will can't play it. Doesn't mean we're not going to make it. It just means that this game is not going to be for people with severe vision issues, just like a dexterity game would not be good for someone with physical issues.
Can I throw something in there?
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
The QR codes really slow it down, and really, and it makes it. It isn't a good solution unless you absolutely have to. And I do it with some of my accessibility kits, but I only do it with a couple of them. It seems like a great solution, but it really, really isn't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a really interesting point. And overall, like the idea that, yes, it might make things more accessible. However, it's completely ruining or removing you from the experience. Like, you're not getting the same feeling that everybody else wants from a game. It's kind of putting a barrier between you.
Yeah, and going back to a question you had for Richard, the games that disabled people want are what everybody wants.
Yeah.
In other words, they just want to be part of the conversation, part of what's hot. So in that sense, Richard becomes just a translator. And so he's probably swamped up to his ears in what people actually want. It's now he has to figure out, how does this actually translate?
Right.
And it's
Go ahead,
I try to own. What I've learned is I only want to really do what I would consider the evergreen games at this point. Because right when I was starting, I was like, all right, I'll do these Kickstarters. But that's come to bite me, because this game that I spent all this time translating had one print run and it's gone. And it's like, oh, well, I guess I have to move on. One more thing that I wanted to throw out about designing for people with vision impairments. Don't forget the biggest one.
Which is?
Color blindness.
Yeah.
That is the biggest thing that people need to design for, because that is something that I cannot do. It's actually easier for me to make a game for a completely blind person than to try to fix something that doesn't work for colorblind people after the fact. And that's something that is cheap and easy to fix if you're thinking, well, maybe not easy to fix because there are lots of different kinds of color blindness, but that is definitely something that designers and publishers need to keep in mind all the time. And
because
go on.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to pick up from there that if someone is keeping color blindness in mind from the beginning of the process, it is so easy to make it accessible for colorblind. Symbols, there have been a dozen or so Kickstarters I've given advice on while they're running, saying, hey, you've got a great game here, but why didn't you put an icon in the corner? Or you have an icon in the corner, but it's too small. If you make it a little bit larger, it will work. You know, I mean, so these simple things that can help either low vision or colorblind or both, because like that's the other thing for Will. He's also colorblind on top of the severe vision issues. So when he can see, he can't tell the difference. So like red and black, was it red and black, right? Or same?
Pretty much most colors.
Well, okay. But anywho, so the
contrast is my friend.
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing is I advise people about contrast. There's been lots of games where I see red on black, or they pick just the same colors and it's like yellow on yellow or purple on purple and they're just slightly different shades, but it's not enough contrast. You need people to be able to see. And this is just everybody. If you play in poor light, you're getting older, there's a lot of reasons. It just expands your audience base. If you take these small considerations into mind when you're designing from the beginning, because it does cost more if you want to fix it later on in the process when you've already got all your graphic design done. You put it up there and people are like, hey, why didn't you just do this small little change? Well, that small little change would have been easier before.
Yeah, like for example,
it's built in.
Yeah. Maybe red is also represented with triangles.
Yeah.
Or blue is squares, yellow is circles, green is pentagons. Just that little graphic design is
and it has
enough.
to be distinct icons. People often do art as icons.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work, especially if you're looking at low vision. If all your icons look like the same general outline. So if you filled your whole icon in with black, do the outlines look distinct enough for just someone with low vision? And oftentimes I'm seeing, no, they're not distinct enough. I think like we gave advice on groves because they used the fairies, the different fairies as their icons, but they were very much the same. So we helped them, and it was kind of late in the process because they were on Kickstarter already, but they were able to tweak their fairies enough to make them distinct. But again, they were using art as icons instead of simpler icons.
Yeah, I hope designers are listening. This is awesome advice. But you guys have started touching on this already, but I think it's kind of important that people understand that there are different kinds of visual impairments. So maybe really quickly we can talk about some of the differences, because I think when you say visual impairments, people either literally only think blind or only think colorblind. They don't really realize there's a whole spectrum of things that can be involved in that.
Well, I mean, you've got a range of vision. I mean, I wear glasses. So if I don't wear my glasses, I can't see the board. But even then, this is not perfect. You've got, I don't know.
It's nearsighted, farsighted, the focusing problems. There's blind spots where you you just can't see anything at all, and your brain just translates as if it wasn't there. But you know it's there because when you put it right in that blind spot, you can't see
It's
it.
gone.
Yeah, you have the color blindness. You have focusing clarity problems when you have like cataracts. You have light sensitivity, as Sarah pointed out. We were playing with a friend, and she couldn't see the cards because there just wasn't enough light. So I brought in a reading light and shined it right down on top of her, just so it brought out the light that she could see.
Yeah, I vaguely remember a video a couple of months ago was posted that you could actually watch. I wish I remember what it was called, but it shows almost all the major different vision issues. So it shows you a picture, and then it tells you what the eye condition is, and then it changes the image so you can see, kind of get a sense of what people with that condition can see or not see in that case. So, yeah.
Whenever I approach it, and I think this comes from being a big NFB member, and they really have a focus on, especially in their training centers, of training someone from the standpoint of being completely blind and giving them the skills that they need to function as a completely blind individual. And then if they can see, great. But someone's vision in your life always goes downhill. I didn't need glasses 5 years ago. I need glasses now. And the assumption that people, if you start learning everything that you need from being completely blind, and then if you can see more, it's a bonus. Whenever I'm working with a student or someone else who has some sort of visual impairment, I assume that they can see nothing. If I'm wrong, that's fine. It doesn't matter. But I assume that they can see nothing, and I go from there. So when I say someone who's blind, I don't necessarily. Most blind people are not. Most people who I call blind are not completely blind. The vast majority of people who are in the blind community are not completely blind.
Yeah,
that's more of a rarity, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's important to make that distinction because, as I said, I think people make pretty big assumptions around that.
And that's honestly why I tell people Will's legally blind, because under the legal terms, there are a lot of things he can't do because his vision's that bad, but doesn't mean he's completely blind. But that's just it. Most of his family have different levels of this legal blindness, and even then it ranges from his brother having much better vision but still being considered legally blind to his mother who's much worse. So there's a huge spectrum in between. Like Richard said, there are very rare people that are completely blind. The community is mostly somewhere in between.
Yeah. So I mean, blindness and low vision, you'd be more likely to see people that have low vision than that are even within the range of blindness. And even if they have very, very little vision, a lot of people still have residual vision in terms of light sensitivity and things like that, or flashes of color. Speaking of which, contrast. Let's go back to contrast for a quick second. Contrast for me, as an occupational therapist, was always my #1 tool when working with people with low vision, because we had to use contrast in order to do everything. So things like figure ground issues. If you guys have ever, if anybody has ever looked into like their junk drawer or their cutlery drawer trying to find a specific piece of cutlery and not being able to because of all the clutter, that's called the figure ground problem. And that's a very big issue as well, that we can help people with figure ground visual processing issues by just using very high contrast backgrounds. So by using like a very black background, we make the foreground stick out more. And so a lot of graphic design can be done that way as well, where we're using high contrast in order to make sure that people can see better, and can pick up the pieces that they need, that it's not lost in the composition of the artwork, that it's actually iconographic and presented and popped out from the background in a way. So things like heavy stroke, using heavy strokes around your icons can help. It may make it look kind of ugly, But you can get some really artistically done ones that, hey, that pops out, but it also is well integrated into the overall card frame or the artwork on the board. Other things that we can do, I like what you're doing, Richard, with the the vacuum forming. We used to do that with wiki sticks. Do you guys know what wiki sticks are? If you don't know what wiki sticks are, do you know what they are, Erica?
Yeah, it's the wax sticks, right?
Yeah. Because you probably use them in class.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and so we used to use this all the time to do profile maps. So to raise the edges along maps and trace routes out for people to follow. Like I'd make a wiki stick map that they'd carry with them to learn a bus route in the city or something like that, right?
Yeah, sorry, if you're not sure what a wiki stick is, it's literally a piece of string covered in wax that you can mold and bend into any type of shape. So then it also sticks to other forms of wax. So you can have as many of these sticks as you want and kind of create any three-dimensional object. So you could make a very raised, easy to kinesthetically touch board.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of applications that you can do with that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say this summer when I was running a game design thing with a bunch of blind people, that was one of our go-to things, and we had like this is tactile foam.
Oh, nice.
Different patterns and stuff. That's some of the things that we used for the game design thing with a bunch of.
Where'd you get that? I'm really interested in that. Where did you get that?
I don't know where they got it. The people at the U-Slam handed it to me, and I ended up taking a bunch of it home. It's called Texture. TXTUR foam by Creative Hands. I mean, kind of neat stuff. This would be cool for prototyping, especially if you want to use something like if you want to do something where blind is a mechanic. This would be used.
Yeah, Erica's got her brains all going now. I can see the wheels turning in Erica's brain. She's going, oh, I could make something out of that. That's really cool.
I'm already seeing three-dimensional shapes.
Yeah, it's neat. Now, Richard, you're using your 3D printer a lot lately. What have you been making on it that would be, other than the dice that you've shown, that would be for people with visual impairments?
We make, we don't make as much stuff as I'd like to, but we make braille cells, which they can fold out, that kind of, we make a couple things for teaching braille. We have these things like Legos that have a braille dots on the top, and they can kind of snap together, and you can use them to spell out words. Those are the main things that we have right now. But I mean, I have a full-time job other than this, so I don't all that much time to actually play with stuff with the 3D printing. So we have the dice, we have a couple other things for teaching and learning braille, and that's most of what we do with the 3D printing.
That's one thing that reminds me is when it comes to game upgrades. So one thing I absolutely love about a lot of the new Kickstarters is they provide shaped meeples. And ever since they started doing that, we've gone for games that have and provide shaped meeples, because that's easier for Will to be able to feel this is actually whatever it is, a pig or whatever. And I think that's something that I'm really glad that it's become more possible to make shapes. I love meeples anyways, but the first couple of years we were playing games, it was all cubes. And so it was really challenging to help him keep, okay, these are the red cubes, these are the green cubes, keep them separated. Now, when we play a lot of games, it's okay, here you go. And then he can just feel them and see what he has in terms of resources. So I think going forward, that's another thing designers can keep in mind. If they really want to make their games visually accessible, make your components different shapes. And I'm including coins. I get so frustrated when games make 3 different size or 3 different types of coins, but they're all exactly the same size. That makes it very difficult for someone with vision disabilities to tell them apart. So if you can make them different sizes, make them different shapes. I've seen several that make them slightly square or different types of edging, but size is definitely the best way to differentiate them, as well as the outside, the shape of it.
Now that you said that, I want Braille meeples now.
You want Braille meeples?
Yeah.
There you go, Richard. There's a new project.
New project.
R for red.
Once I get my laser cutter going again, I'm probably gonna start selling some aftermarket things that just have like cut shapes.
Nice.
Where you can use those to triangles. You can replace any games, all the red pieces with these triangles, and I consistently have every color be the same shape, so that you know that whenever you touch a triangle, it's this color. Whenever you touch a circle, it's this color. That's one thing that I'm doing. But my laser cutter went down a month after I got it, so I have not gotten it fixed yet, and I need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, that would be really awesome.
Yeah,
that would be.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you guys have given some amazing advice throughout this that hopefully we almost need to make a list of please do all of this in a game.
Yeah.
So what I thought, because we only have a few minutes left, and I'm sure you guys all know somebody or maybe several people who really deserve kind of a shout out for making games accessible or allowing games, kind of like Richard does, where after the fact that they're going back and allowing other people to be able to play. Do you guys want to mention anybody quickly and just say you're doing a great job at this too?
Who's putting together that list of all the do's and don'ts for designers?
I wish I knew what you were talking about.
Ian?
Yeah, Ian.
Oh, Meeple's like Meeple like us?
Yeah.
Oh,
Meeple,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
they
yeah,
did
okay.
the accessibility reviews, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they were putting together a big list.
There's, what's his name? The guy that I'm thinking of.
I am totally blanking, and I feel really bad. It's getting late for my brain.
Totally.
I've stumped
But-
everybody. Sorry.
Yeah, but definitely, if you haven't read Meeple, it's Meeple's Like Us. Is that the website?
Meeple like us.
Meeple Like Us. Okay, if you haven't read that, go check it out. Ian and his crew totally ripped apart Rock Paper Wizards, which was awesome. But granted, it should be for accessibility. It's not the most accessible game. If you can't make certain hand shapes with your fingers, you can't play the game. But it's a really good resource because it kind of shows you just how deep you have to go in order to make something more accessible. And this is one point that I did want to bring up, and Erica will understand this from a teaching perspective, that, maybe it's more about universal design than it is about, designing specifically for one very specific disability type or class, that we should be looking more at how is this universally going to be acceptable for everybody, or at the most people at once, right? And also that we kind of have to get over the fact that, this is not a zero-sum thing, that making something more accessible for one person really doesn't make it that much less accessible for another. And I think there's some blowback when a couple months ago there was a big discussion about color blindness on some of the forums, and a lot of people were like, why would we make this change? I don't care. If you want to make a change, write it down in marker. And then a lot of other people were saying, well, but we can make the change. Why shouldn't we make the change?
Especially if it's easy early changes, as you guys pointed out.
Yeah.
Honestly, it opens up your market. The more people you make your game for, that means the more people that are going to buy your game. If you're a business person, just think about it that way. More audience is more money.
Yeah.
So the sooner you design for everybody and make it the most accessible, the more success you're going to have. So think about it from a selfish point of view if you have to.
Because like it or not, your game is probably not all that unique. There's probably something else similar, and the audience will go to the person that did do their work and make it more accessible.
I think that's a fair warning.
Yeah. And like Richard said, vision is, so other than hearing, vision is like the number one thing that we all will lose over time. Just developmentally, that's what happens. And so
laser eye surgery. I already would try to correct it.
Right. And so, as we get older, one of the things that we can do is still play games. That's something that I believe all of us here on this panel will do for the rest of our lives. And as our eyesight gets worse, you still probably want to play games. And so companies out there, if you're looking at continuing with the market, that it's not, the market isn't just, you know, the young kids and the teenagers and the, you know, young adults. There's a whole graying, aging population of people who want to play games and love games desperately, but their eyesight will be failing. So I think, you know, everybody's insight here into how to make those games a little bit more accessible, you know, it's something you should probably listen to. In fact, you know, if you want to maybe talk to Richard or to Sarah and Will about, you know, consultation around how to make a game more accessible for people with vision issues, you know, maybe they're the people you should get into, and they probably have more contacts as well to help them help you make good decisions about your products. Is there any last minute suggestions, Richard, for game designers out there in terms of how to make your game more accessible, just in general, but maybe vision in specifics? What do you think, Richard? What should they do?
I don't.
We covered this already.
I know.
Make sure that it is good for color blindness. That's the biggest thing, I think, because if they really have that big of vision problem or something like that, then they're going to have to do some aftermarket solution or some personalized solution or custom rules or something else.
Mhm.
But there's no reason why you can't do something for the colorblind right now.
Right. Okay.
That would be
It's almost like throwing extra expenses at them.
right there. It's too small a community to focus in on blindness, I think, and that's why. So I'm not able to do this for a full-time job.
Right. Okay. And Sarah and Will, what's your one takeaway piece for designers out there?
It'll make your text readable.
Yeah, high contrast, large font, because again, we're all getting older. We all want to keep playing games, just like Sen said. So don't use tiny, tiny, tiny font and high contrast.
Watch out from the super cursive-y.
Yeah, font
I mean,
type.
it looks great, but I'll even tell Sarah, what does this say? And she goes, hold on. And she looks in the rules. That's supposed to be a shield or says shield? I don't know.
Yeah, so type of font, size of font, contrast with the background. If you want people to play your game, they have to be able to read it.
Right, and if you have to use the super tiny font anyway from a design standpoint, you're screwed up. You need to make your game concise and easy to play.
Yeah.
Very true.
You messed up a long time ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in on this really rare Friday night panel. I'm sorry about Wednesday. That was all my fault, 100% me. And, you know, it's great to have you guys on. I'm sorry that John couldn't be with us. We'll do another show with John at another time and look for some other designers who look at the things he particularly is interested in. And I think we've learned a lot tonight. I know Erica has been taking notes, and I've been taking notes, and I know that Jesse and Sir Bob on the chat have been taking notes as well. So thank you so much to the guests for giving us a little bit of a view into how you guys design games and modify games for people with low vision and blindness. Excellent. So before we go, next week, I believe, is starting something from scratch, like building something from nothing. And we'll have our guests, Gerald King III from Ohio, who does Ultimate Team Up, which is an event that he runs where he pairs entrepreneurs and designers and artists together to make stuff, and that's cool. And we have our good friend Pam Walls coming on. Erica, do you want to just give us a brief intro to Pam while she's not here?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually, she just finished the second year of Proto-TO, which is a prototype convention in Toronto that Pam started last year. I helped last year. I didn't help this year, I'll be honest. But yeah, so it's really great to see that people are basically making grassroots efforts to keep promoting game design to make it more easily, again, accessible. But you know, you can't really get a game out there. You can't really work it as much as you want to without having chances to play them in these type of settings. They're really important.
Excellent. So we'll have those two people on the show next week, and the week after that, we're going to be talking about giving back to your community with Avanel Wing and Kate Bullock, and that's going to be an amazing show. If you know either of those people from the design community, from Breakout Con, Metatopia, all sorts of other events around New Jersey and Toronto, you're in for a really good, insightful show about how we can build community within gaming. All right, so with that note, we're going to sign off. So thank you very much once again to Richard, Will, and Sarah for coming on to the Meeple Syrup Show on a Friday night and not going out and partying, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what you guys do on Friday
Play
night.
games.
All those hardcore partiers.
Yes,
Yeah.
play
Yeah.
games.
Well,
Sleep right now.
Will was raising the roof earlier. So there he goes. He's raising the roof. All right, thanks very much, guys. We'll see you guys in a bit.
Thank you.
Bye.